Welcome to the Western Woman Podcast. I'm your host, GABRIELA MILIAN. We'll take you through exhilarating conversations highlighting modern women who have taken the path less traveled towards living authentically and helping others do the same. Western society is an interesting place that has brought innovation for the rest of the world, but sometimes we find our culture struggling in areas that some would argue are more important. Each guest will give a new take on how they've tackled some of these struggles, and my good friend Alex Chatterjee is no different. She's a dual Columbia grad, merging traditional psychotherapy with neuroscience and somatic healing. Her expertise lies in the treatment of anxiety and stress management, depression, loss and grief, low self-esteem, and trauma. With that said, she's lived many lives, and I was even surprised when I first met her to find out that she served in the military, which has inspired her work in helping those suffering with trauma and how it affects the body. Thank you to my dear friend Alex Chatterjee for being here. I have to preface this, she is a friend of mine, but she is a great professional in the psychotherapy space. So we're going to be talking more about that stuff. And also I have to highlight that this episode is brought to you by AMATHU'SIA Collections, because she's also a creative who makes beautiful jewelry. So of course I had to wear one of her masterpieces. But the first question that I want to ask everyone on this podcast is, what is a Western woman to you?
So I feel like a Western woman to me is a self-determined woman. I feel like she is a wise and a strong woman, but I feel like that is women across the globe. But when I think about Western women specifically, I would say we're very discerning, very questioning, very defying. And I think that there was a certain time in society where I think that maybe came with working more and really trying to carve out that space for us in the workforce. Sure. And at this point, what I'm seeing is a shift in that and maybe perhaps starting to scale back and working less. And I think that often is kind of the natural evolution of finding change. I think that when you experience one end of the spectrum, oftentimes when you are finding resolution, there's a tendency to overcorrect. And I think that now that we've experienced both ends of those spectrums, we're kind of sitting in this state of recalibration and really kind of sitting with ourselves and saying, okay, now that I have proven to myself that I can indeed do it all, what is it that I actually want? And how can I get this without burning myself out in the process, without sacrificing my body? And so I would say collectively, I've seen a massive shift in women really sitting with themselves and asking themselves this question and really still wanting to live a purpose and mission-driven life, but in their own way. And so maybe we haven't quite figured it out yet, but I think I've noticed just amongst a lot of women, I mean, I'm thinking of you, myself, just conversations I've had personally, professionally, it's been a massive theme. And even whenever I think about you and your career, right, I think it took a tremendous amount of strength, courage to get to the point that you did in your journalism career. And I think that's something to be immensely proud of. And I think similarly, it took the same amount of strength and courage to pull back and carve out a life to start this next phase of your journey in motherhood, right? And I think that's also something to be immensely proud of. And I think we're all just trying to figure it out. How can I find that balance? What does that look like for me? And how can I do so in a way that feels right and healthy for my body? So I think that collectively I'm seeing that Western woman, we're here, we're asking these questions and we're trying to figure it out.
For sure. And I appreciate you recognizing that. Like, even in my own journey, because she's a dear friend, I've shared a lot about my own experiences and just the struggles of, I mean, I feel like I'm the epitome of a Western woman. That's why I named the podcast this, because I feel like it highlights a lot of the excitement in my life, but also the struggles.
Yeah.
And I feel like a struggle that a lot of women face is only finding purpose in their careers. So transitioning to motherhood was difficult for me because I decided to be a stay-at-home mom. And I feel that this podcast is a way for me to help, drive my purpose and to continue to talk to other women, have fun adult conversations. My baby's cool, but, the goo goo gaga can only get you so far, mentally. So it's one of those things where I think that's where the struggle is I know for me personally, I definitely went on overdrive
Yeah.
and then saw my body crumbling in certain ways,
Yes.
needed to take a step back, kind of recalibrate. Now, I feel like I fixed a lot of my health issues, but
Mm-hmm.
now it's the question of how do I serve my community while
Mm-hmm.
continuing to put my family and serve them first.
Absolutely.
So, when it comes to women that you see in your practice, what do you feel like are the main struggles they're coming to you with?
I would say a massive theme is burnout. That is one that I see pretty consistently. Women knowing and yearning for something more. I think deep down we know that there's a different way to live, but maybe not yet having the tools or the answers to obtain that yet. But if they're coming to me, I think deep down they know that there is a different path. And collectively, what I'm seeing is a massive amount of burnout, but yearning for balance. And I would also say struggling with shame. Shame because I think that there's a lot of societal stories on what we should be doing or what our lives should look like. But maybe once you've obtained that, it doesn't feel as fulfilling as you thought that it would feel. And so now you're stuck in this state of like, okay, I got the thing, it doesn't feel as fulfilling as I had dreamt that it would. Now, what is it that I really want? How can I create that in my life? So I feel like that's a theme that I see a lot with a lot of the women that have been coming to me.
Sure. And do you feel like men have similar struggles, or do you think it's a little different?
I would say it's a bit different for men. I do mostly work with women, but men do find their ways to me. I think with men, it's actually finally kind of holding space for some of this more emotional stuff to come through. I think that they've been living in the more rational, analytical, and haven't maybe throughout their life had space to express maybe some of these difficulties that they've experienced through some of their life experiences. And this is finally their opportunity to kind of go back in time, revisit some of these things, and find solution and resolution in that.
Sure.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And I know that maybe you don't work with men as much, but you
Mm-hmm.
did work in a very male-dominated
Yes.
field. I have to tell everyone, Alex was in the military for a little while. And I remember when I met you, because she's just such this beautiful, flowing, dainty young lady. When I found out that she was in the military, I was like, no wonder you became a psychotherapist. You need to heal from that. But what drew you to the military, and what did the military make you realize as far as, wow, I need to dive into maybe my own psyche, help others? What was that experience like for you? Because I feel like
Yeah.
you have a completely different lifestyle now. I think most people would be surprised to hear that you served in the military.
Yeah, that's always a big shocker for sure. I mean, I think what drew me to it was just a yearning to create a life for myself that I didn't think was possible given the environment that I was in. And I think that at a very young age, I've always been um, very, very determined. And I think that I had big ideals for myself. And I grew up in a very small town in Texas, in a space where not many people left. My family didn't have a lot of money. And so I also knew that I wanted to go on to college and really kind of create a life for myself. And so at the time, that felt like a really good opportunity to carve out independence for myself. And I think led me to this path of therapy, like many among this path, it was really a matter of finding healing for myself, finding answers for myself, and I think really trying to understand myself in this world and how to maximize my potential. So I would say initially it was very self-serving.
Sure.
A lot of innate curiosity so as to kind of work through that myself. And I think once I started to find some of that healing, I think the natural cycle of that is you want to start giving that back to others and to help people who have been on similar paths. So got through the military many, many years later, as I was finishing up my training to be a therapist. I found myself back in the military setting, but this time in the VA working with veterans. Didn't think I was going to find myself back in that space. I felt like at that point, the military felt like another life. I mean, I hadn't really thought about it much. I mean, of course, there were elements of it that I think were embedded within my life in this very subtle, subconscious way, but it wasn't something that I actively thought about. It felt like a very distant life from me. But I think it was an incredibly powerful experience to be back in that setting and just kind of seeing firsthand how necessary this is for our veterans. And I, at that point, so now I primarily work with women. Of course, in the VA setting, it was primarily men. And I remember there was one group in particular that was just so impactful for me. I was hosting this therapy group for men, and it was positive living for the aging. And it was a lot of Vietnam veterans. And, they were at a time where we didn't really celebrate our veterans in the way that we do now. They didn't have a lot of resources. And so having this group of men be able to collectively come together, share their experiences, connect with one another, and have this safe space to really feel heard and seen, it was powerful. I mean, these men were so grateful for the services that we were giving them. Yeah. That was seeing also the real impact of like capital T trauma. We all experience traumas, and it's not to minimize one over the other. But I mean, these people experience real war trauma. And I think seeing how that impacted not just the psyche, but the whole body made me realize, okay, we have to incorporate the body in this healing process. So that was kind of the beginning of the gestation of incorporating somatics, but it didn't quite, I wouldn't say it didn't quite get incorporated immediately, but the wheels were spinning, you know what I mean? A seed had been planted, and later things kind of started to come together more and more.
Sure. Now, and I'm so glad that was such a great experience for you, because I feel like not only can it be hard to, I mean, a lot of people know my father's in the military, so it can be hard to break through emotionally for a veteran to begin with, but also just the older generation.
Oh, yeah.
The older generation looks at therapy and mental health totally different than we do. So the fact that they were open and receptive is really beautiful, because I think a lot of people, when they get to that stage, maybe you're not, a senior citizen yet, but even when you're kind of approaching those ages, you might think like, oh, everything's fine, everything's good. But kind of like you said, the body speaks to you. Even if you're not dealing with your trauma, your body is dealing with it.
Absolutely.
So when I saw that you were incorporating somatic healing practices, you said that was kind of the start, like the spark of it. What kind of continued down that journey? Because some people might still consider somatic healing as like this woo-woo thing. Yeah. And even though you and I are totally into it, it's something that I feel a lot of people maybe aren't afraid of, but just find to be borderline taboo, even some people do, especially if they come from certain backgrounds where maybe religion might be a part of it too. I feel like some people from my background, heavy Christian background, somatic healing, like shaking and letting your body and using your breath in different ways. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what spirit is entering you? Kind of a deal. I've heard all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So what was maybe another part of your journey that made you realize, oh yeah, this is definitely something important for me, but even to incorporate in my practice?
Yeah, when I think back on that, I feel like it was two things kind of converging at once. And I think it was an invitation from the universe. And I think you can either choose to answer it or not. The universe will continue to send those invitations until you do. But really, I think it all kind of collided once I had finished my formal schooling to be a therapist. And I was finally working full-time as a therapist. And mind you, this was a very long and intentional path to becoming a therapist. So it wasn't something that I just happened upon. I really wanted to do this work. And so I thought once I was finally doing the work, I'd feel a bit more connected to it. But what I was finding was a sense of disconnect. And it wasn't like I felt like this was the wrong path. It wasn't regret. It wasn't questioning whether I was doing the right thing. It was more so, I think looking back, it was burnout. I think that there was a disconnect with what my mind was rationally knowing and what my body was feeling, So while I felt that it was the right path for me and I knew that it was, I didn't somatically feel that. I wasn't embodying that essence. And I think interestingly, what was also happening was that was kind of being mirrored and reflected back to me. I think similarly to what I had mentioned earlier, a lot of the people that I was working with also were experiencing a sense of burnout, feeling disconnected from their bodies, But also what was really interesting to me was every time that I work with a new client, I always ask how their therapy experience was before in the past, if they've done therapy before. I always ask, what were some of the things that you liked, that you didn't like, that resonated, that didn't? And what I was hearing across the board for those who had done therapy before in the past was, I feel like I've exacerbated myself of speaking about my problem. I've gone in circles just talking about my problem. And while I rationally kind of understand things and know that there's better for me, I don't feel differently. And so I was like, okay, here we're all me, and what is being presented to me as well in the clinical space is there's this disconnect between what we know and what we feel. And again, it was like that light bulb of like, okay, here we are trying to resolve the problem with our thoughts, which is a vital process. The rational mind plays a very important role, but it's limited in nature. And so here I was, doing my research as I do, just kind of diving into it and being like, okay, what else is out there? What is the missing element? And that's when I really started to take a deep dive into exploring this other world of somatics. And I found a program called the School of Embodied Arts, which is an amazing program. That's what I ended up doing. And I think also, too, is in signing up for these programs, kind of what I said earlier, and how a lot of what I do is first and foremost for myself. What I love about training programs is it really forces you to drop in and be devoted to the practice. When you're getting trained and certified, you have to be a participant in that practice very deliberately. And so this was a year-long program. I was very devoted to the practice. That was part of the curriculum. Not only was I giving the sessions, but I was receiving. That was also part of the curriculum. So you had to be in the receiving seat as well. And so after a year of really dropping into this, I saw how profound it was in my life. I mean, it shifted how I look at life completely and the way that our body plays a role in this process. And then once I felt comfortable to start bringing that into the therapeutic space, it was really, really fascinating because at this point, I had been working with some clients maybe for a year already. And prior to that, it was kind of traditional talk psychotherapy, And I would, tell them, I've been incorporating this new modality. Would you be interested? I think it could be an interesting tactic to explore. And it was wild. What I would see was some people who had kind of just been talking about this problem. I'd lead them into this session because it's a very kind of intuitive, emotional session. So a lot of the somatic sessions that I do, there's different practices that I do, but it is kind of this guided meditation where you have your eyes shut, you're kind of moving a bit, you're tapping into the body, and we'll work with an intention. So if it's in regard to maybe shame or an experience that you've had before in the past, I'll kind of loosely start dropping that in and kind of taking you layer by layer to feel it a bit more deeply. So it's not a rational process at all. Sure. And what I would see was these clients have these like massive cathartic releases that I never saw the entire year that I worked with them. Because the rational mind, while it is powerful, it can play tricks on us and it can keep us in this distance between us and that problem. It can intellectualize the problem. It can talk about the problem, but like not really drop in to the root textures of that issue or that experience that we've had, which I think we have to allow ourselves to feel the emotional impact of those things in order to release and let go. I mean, we have to train the body that it is safe to feel. It's safe to be in our body. It's safe to flow through these emotions. We want to live in a state of flow, allow ourselves to feel the pain, the grief, the sadness, and also that then allows for us to experience joy and ecstasy more vibrantly as well. So, sure. Yeah. I mean, all of these things kind of converging and like just seeing it firsthand in that space, I was like, wow, how it impacted me. I definitely saw it impact others in a similar way.
That's beautiful because I'm so glad people were receptive to it too. And I feel like probably they were feeling like, it's the things I've been doing hasn't worked. Why not? Like maybe even did you feel like some of them, they might have been a little hesitant, but they were like, you know what? F it. Like let's try it out. Because it's one of those things that even for my own journey personally, and I've told you about this as well, is I remember I got to a point where, because I had been going to traditional psychotherapy for probably about 5 to 6 years, bouncing to different people because part of my issue, I feel like, and maybe other people have this in therapy as well, was I was almost making the therapist like, oh, because I haven't had any changes, they're a bad therapist, which isn't always the case. You have to really take responsibility. And I felt like traditional talk therapy helped me to communicate my issues to my inner circle, to my close loved ones. Like, hey, this is what I'm going through. If, just have some grace and patience with me. I'm really working through it. I understand how this is probably affecting your life because you're a close loved one of mine. And I felt like that was really helpful, but kind of like feeling the difference, like you said, the change. And that's also kind of how I went through my journey, is looking into hypnotherapy, different somatic practices, and just seeing how the subconscious and how we hold things in our body. And I'm sure you've heard of Dr. Gabor Mate. I love his work. I'm going to be seeing him. He's having an event in the city. When I read his work even more so, I saw how, like, oh my goodness, yeah, we really need to work through these traumas, like on a physical, like the whole spectrum.
Yeah.
And started trying to incorporate different practices, even how my health issues, like my physical health issues, started going away. Me thinking like, oh no, I just need to cut back on some sodium or things like that. But when I actually worked through certain traumas, or some people don't like to call, when I worked with men in particular, a lot of men, they think that unless they're a veteran that, went to Vietnam War or something, that they haven't experienced real trauma. So to resonate with them, I'm like, okay, let's call it a complex. You've got a couple complexes that we got to work through. We all have our traumas, but we can call it different things. We'll call it something different just to make you feel more comfortable. But that's one thing that I was like, wow, we hold so much in our body. Literally losing weight without trying.
No, it's wild.
With trying, but but doing different things. So back in more evolutionary, thousands of years ago times, if we buried our feelings, we didn't survive. Our feelings, our intuition was literally what let us know, oh, something's not right. Oh, there's an oncoming threat that's going to eat me or something. Yeah. So how do you think that the modern world has kind of affected this maybe distrust of, or just distaste of wanting to deal with our feelings and how it's affecting the body?
Well, I think that unfortunately what has happened was, I think that this innate fight, flight, or freeze system, it was built for kind of our, caveman days when we actually had a real threat. So we were maybe running from a tiger. We were like trying to find food, whatever, right? So it was these more scarce experiences that would happen, but whenever they did happen, we would be able to activate that system and then recalibrate once we got through it. Nowadays with technology, I think we're always in that state of fight, fight, or freeze, so it's no longer just a physical threat that we're facing. It's that text that you get from your boss. It is imposter syndrome that you feel at work. It's a relationship. It's this constant reminding of all these different stressors that are going on in your lives. And I think that it's completely caused the system to go haywire. And so it's always being activated. It's always being activated. So we're in this state of constant stress. I think that collectively as a society, we are chronically stressed. And what science now is telling us, so yes, while somatics maybe, or I guess incorporating the body or looking at how stress affects the body may have felt a bit more woo, science is now telling us that stress has massive implications on the physical health of our body. I mean, it causes inflammation. It's tied to chronic disease. It is tied to tensions and muscle aches, and I think even beyond that, it also is embedded in these mannerisms and how we carry ourselves. And so I think more and more, hopefully, we're realizing that while the rational mind plays a really important role, we have this entire body. This is like one very small part of the body. And in order to move through this and feel and show up differently, we're going to have to start incorporating the body. Because just because you think a certain way, you can change your thoughts. And that's definitely an important part of the process, changing your stories, changing your thoughts. Unless you have trained and conditioned the body to feel differently, you'll still show up, know consciously that you are worthy, but your body is going to feel differently. You haven't trained the body to actually exude and feel into that state of confidence and actually carry yourself with confidence too, because it's in these subtleties. You know, the world, we are always in a state of judging. We all do it. And it's very below the level of awareness. I don't think it's malintentioned. But when you have been carrying a story of shame, it shows up in your body, and people are perceiving that and reacting and responding in regard to that, you know, and it's not up here, it's below the level of awareness. And so a lot of times we're holding ourselves back without even realizing it, just through the body language. And so when I think of somatics in this process, it's like, yes, it helps relinquish some of these physical ailments such as inflammation and chronic disease, but it also helps us to show up and embody the desired feelings that we actually want to feel and experience as well.
Sure. And I feel like what you just highlighted is, it's like, okay, some of these things might have seemed woo-woo, but science is now proving it. And I tell people all the time, I feel like I have to bring this up, is science actually brought me closer to spirituality in a lot of ways. I never was, even though I grew up with a strict Christian background, you know, I think because it was so strict, you know, you can kind of rebel against it. And I was very like science-driven, science-based, all about making money, my career, success, and felt like I was able to achieve a lot of those things, but then that lack of fulfillment, these health issues I was experiencing. And when I started learning more about the Eastern belief systems and the chakras, what I like about that ideology is what it's kind of teaching us is the mind lives everywhere. It's not just in our head. It's not just really, the brain is just kind of our control center. You know, it's just kind of processing what's going on in the rest of the body. But we really still have to listen to what's going on. You know, that's why they say when you have a gut feeling that something's not right, these phrases come from powerful places that really make a lot of sense. And I would even see it too, like when I was going through certain issues, I was having certain issues in kind of the different chakra points. So I was like, these belief systems that are thousands and thousands of years old, I was like, maybe they're kind of onto something. Where in the beginning, I didn't really believe, I at least didn't, maybe I believed in the Bible a little bit, but I didn't believe in like the Eastern belief systems at all until I saw it kind of coming out into my body. So that's one thing, because I know somatic healing, it's kind of like bringing the West and East together. And I feel like that's part of the reason why I named this Western Woman podcast, is because I see a lot of the struggles that we're going through in Western society. But that doesn't mean that Eastern society is perfect. I do have comments on them too, trust me. But I see how they're a little bit more connected with their body or nature or their family, which is very important. I'm sure you deal with a lot of family issues in your therapy sessions, you know, working through issues with mom and dad or even other ancestors in their family lineage. And what do you think for your life in particular have these more Eastern practices and Eastern beliefs, how they've affected you?
The Eastern practices and Eastern beliefs, I feel like it's definitely, as I mentioned earlier, once I kind of started to do this somatic training, it completely transformed the way in which I view the body in this process. And now I bow to my body. It is literally the, not to sound all woo, but it actually is the vessel that allows for us to experience life. It is the very thing that allows for us to go to work, to have experiences, to have relationships. And I put the body first in everything that I do. And I think really getting in tune with the body, which I think is cultivated through sensitivity. I think we think of intuition as this kind of like elusive, esoteric thing, but we're all innately born intuitive. I think that when we live in this really distracted society where we have so much stimulation, we miss those internal cues. But no, the body is always speaking to you. It is always speaking to you. And the more in which we can cultivate that skill of sensitivity, the more in tune we can get with the body so that we can listen to its messages that it's always feeding us. And when you do that, you really start to live a life of alignment. So I think that when I started to take this course, I was like, whoa, I'm putting the body at the forefront. The body is wise beyond belief. The body has innate healing mechanisms. How can I use the body? You know, the thing that I repeat the most to my clients over and over and over again is that Your body is always working for you, never against you, and symptoms are merely signs from the body pointing you in the direction of that which is seeking healing and recalibration. Because I can't tell you how many times I've worked with clients and they feel angry at their body because they're experiencing symptoms. Why is my body failing me? Why isn't my body keeping up with all the things that I want to do? And I'm like, whoa, 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 you're missing the message here, babe. The body's been speaking to you, and it's going to continue to speak to you even louder and louder and louder with more intense symptoms if you keep ignoring it. And it'll force you to stop if you do keep ignoring it. It's been speaking to you all along. Can you start to honor the body and listen to it and make adjustments accordingly to live in harmony? So I feel like incorporating Eastern philosophies into my life has allowed for me to live a more balanced life, to really start looking at the role that my body plays in this and letting it lead.
Sure. No, and I love what you said. I bow to my body now. I feel like if everyone did that, we wouldn't have the health issues that we have these days. And I feel more so in particular, everyone I feel like in Western society is having chronic illnesses of different sorts. But I feel women in particular are having a lot of health issues that they didn't have before. A lot of it's hormonal. A lot of infertility is on the rise like crazy. A lot of weight issues or skin issues or headaches, like migraines. I used to suffer with a lot of that. Or even just feeling more lethargic and low energy, and why don't I feel as good as I used to, you know, kind of a deal. And I totally agree. The body never lies.
No.
The body never lies. It's always saying something to you. And I actually feel as women, our body speaks up a lot more. You know, actually there's a psychologist that says, you know, a woman's body never lies. A man's body will lie to him sometimes, as far as like he might be seeking pleasure in areas that maybe he shouldn't be seeking, you know, like, or things like that.
Sit with that feeling that you're experiencing a little bit.
But where with women, it's telling us so much, but we over-rationalize things. We get so in our head. And I feel like a lot of it is because of those modern pressures of going from, you know, maybe having more domestic duties before, you know, 50 plus years ago, where that was kind of the norm, to, okay, now women are in the workplace. Women are taking over the workplace in a lot of ways. They're outperforming men. They're taking over industries that used to be more male dominated. But their body is crashing. And a lot of women know this. And I feel there are certain women who can handle, you know, this very go lifestyle that we have in modern, especially, I mean, we're in New York City, you know, you live in New York City, I'm right outside of New York City. It's probably on overdrive for us, even more so than maybe what people are experiencing in other parts of the country. So what do you think if people don't listen to their body, and if we continue to live the way that we are, what do you think are going to be the repercussions long term?
I think we're already seeing a lot of those. I mean, disease is running rampant in this country, which is wild because we have such innovative technology in the field of medicine. And you would think that there would be a balance there, but that's not quite what we're seeing. I mean, I think ultimately, though, what you'll experience is a massive state of burnout where you just can't keep going anymore. And that's going to cause you to, I mean, it may force you to scale back a bit. And hopefully it's something that you can kind of do preemptively, preventatively, so you don't have to get to that space. Because I don't think we have to get to that space to then correct. I think that if you start making intentional decisions now, really tuning into your body now, you can do it before it gets to that point. But I think the repercussions are just experiencing a lot of massive fatigue. I think that always tends to manifest itself as well in physical symptoms, whether that's weight gain, acne, more serious conditions such as inflammation or you know, heart conditions
Cancer,
as well. Exactly. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I think that, really kind of tuning into the body is really key, I think, to live a life of harmony. This body, I mean, the human body has been around since the beginning of time, and I think it knows what it's doing. You know, I think it knows its limitations. Like, let's start listening to it a bit. It's pretty wise.
It's true. You know, it's funny you mention that, because I feel like even though I was into, you know, I was a yoga instructor, I did a lot of these somatic healing practices, more Eastern beliefs that are much more woo-woo, Kundalini activation, which I actually hope to get her on that podcast too, who I do it with. And even though I did feel very in tune with my body, I felt like I became much more appreciative of it once I became a mom. And seeing how, wow, everything is designed perfectly. Like, you know, you grow the baby for so long, the way they come out, even though that's an interesting process, you know, that's quite, you know, just how my body, especially because I chose to have a natural birth and do it at a birthing center and have no intervention pretty much. And just the feeling like, even though I was going through all that pain of contractions and labor at the time, just like my body knew what it wanted. And during labor in particular, it's so funny, your senses are heightened. And I think I was even more aware of how amazing the body is, even though I was in pain, because the midwives, they let me move around. So they were like, okay, we'll get you in the water. Do you want to get up? And yeah, I want to get up. I want to like walk around. I want to do this and that. And I knew what I wanted. It wasn't like, oh, maybe I'll just listen to the midwives. I was like, no, I wanted, because my body was just speaking for me. And even the way that I remember sitting down in the bed and my husband, like after giving birth, and my husband was like, oh, let me see if they're heating up your food for you or something. And I was like, oh, yeah, they are. And they're making some juice for me too. And he was like, okay, whatever. And he just went over. And because I could hear the nurses talking in like 3 rooms down. It was, my senses were so heightened, you know, especially because I didn't have any medication that was numbing me. And I was like, yeah, no, I hear what, and he was like, did you know about this juice before? And I was like, no, I just heard them talking about it right now. And he was like, they're on the other side of the building. What do you mean? And I was like, and just kind of like showing people how powerful it is, or even with nursing my son, like learning about how literally when he latches on, his saliva is communicating with my breast so that he gets exactly what he needs. Like the human body is so amazing. And I felt that on a visceral level after becoming a mom. Yes, I understood it before. Yes, I was doing these practices and becoming healthier before, but I felt like motherhood, it just makes you, it forces you in your body, whether you like it or not, you know, like and that experience alone, I was like, wow. Yeah, I need to listen to my body more. I can't just, even the recovery process, because that's a hard process as well. I understand why, because people will feel mad at their body. Like, why are you failing me? Why are you failing me? And it's like, no, honey, it's talking to you. Your body is
trying to help you.
Yeah, it's trying to help you.
Telling you something isn't right. Now, can we make adjustments accordingly? And I think speaking to what you said as well, I think coming back to the state of inner knowing, you know, I think that in this world of having access to so much information, which is wonderful, of course, that comes with so many benefits, but I think it's easy to outsource our authority, our inner knowing, and think that everybody else is the expert of our lives. And it's coming back to this inner knowing of my body is wise beyond belief. My body knows, my body's speaking to me, my body knows what I need. And I think reinforcing that and reiterating that, because I think it's true. I think it's a matter of kind of scaling that back. It's okay to get the opinions of others. I think it's useful to gather as much information as we can. And that is hugely beneficial. But I think at the end of the day, it has to go through your own internal process of discerning, sitting with your body, seeing how your body reacts or responds to a certain thing, and then saying, okay, this is for me, you know, and listening to the body, because it's been doing this for a long time.
Most definitely.
It does know what to do.
It knows way more than we think it does. And it knows more than the brain. I actually think that our body is a lot smarter than the brain, but just because it doesn't make rational sense sometimes when certain things happen. And another conversation that we've had a lot that I feel like is still related is about plant medicine. And it's definitely something that I feel, I've only had 3 experiences in my life, but to say that it has helped me tremendously in making certain changes and finally feeling like I can make those irrational choices that didn't make sense to my brain at the time. But after going through that experience on the subconscious level, I was like, oh, actually, no, this is the best decision for me. And how do you feel that's helped you in your journey and even others that you've worked with? And what do you think plant medicine could do for everyone as a collective, especially Western society? Because I feel like it's actually what's interesting. I'm Latina. There's a lot of these different plant medicine practices that come from Latin America, but I feel like Latinos use it the least. And which is so interesting because I feel other cultures have found the beauty of it and the healing nature. And it's something that, because I love connecting more to my ancestry, I'm like, oh, why aren't more people using this? Why aren't, especially in our communities? So because I want to, not that I'm necessarily a huge plant medicine advocate, but I want to open my community's eyes to the benefits. I've even talked to family members of mine who are from where ayahuasca is from. And I was like, oh, I was talking to some family members. Have you heard about it? We were talking about things. Oh, no, where is that from? Oh, from the Amazon. They literally thought I was talking about Amazon like Jeff Bezos. Like, oh, I can order that on Amazon. I was like, no, don't order that on, like they had no idea. Meanwhile, they're literally from the country where this is from. And I was like, it made me realize, like, wow, we're so disconnected.
Yeah.
We are. So how do you feel like that could help, like, our society
I mean, I think the biggest thing that it does is it blasts through the ego or the mind. I use those kind of interchangeably. Totally blast through that, and I think the mind, like I've said earlier, has a tendency of playing a lot of tricks on us, and it can create all of these shields as a means of protection, and it does a really good job of convincing you of certain things. You can convince yourself of anything. Oh, I'm so healed, but like, are you really, or are you just avoiding the thing that maybe has triggered you before in the past? Well, this will blast right through it. There's no shield, no wall. And so I think that can definitely be a really interesting experience to see what's going on below the level of awareness. And I think really it's working with the subconscious that is the illuminator of so much of what we still have to work through. And it's not just through plant medicine. I mean, the subconscious comes through in everything. If we listen to the messages again that our body is feeding us, I think anytime that you're triggered by somebody, I think anytime you get certain physiological reactions to certain people, I think anytime you're judging, I think there's usually a hidden message beneath that, and that's your subconscious kind of coming through. It comes through in dreams, daydreams, imaginations, reactions. And so plant medicine definitely goes deep into that subconscious, because the rational conscious mind is totally logged off. It's turned off, and you're really diving deep and exploring everything that's happening and taking place below the level of awareness. And usually that is kind of where most of the work resides, is kind of in that subconscious realm.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And I feel like what's interesting, though, it was so funny when you said, as far as, oh, maybe I'm not as healed as I think I do. I think I am. And I remember a mentor of mine saying once that religion is where people go to hide from God, and spirituality is where people go to hide from the ego. And it's true, because as much as I love spiritual practices, and I'm sure I've been one of these people, I've met so many people who are like, oh, I'm so spiritual, I'm so this, I'm so that, yet they are having so many breakdowns in their life. And not that life is supposed to be perfect, but it's just like, if you were so zen, would you really be going through X, Y, and Z issues with your family, relationships, all this kind of stuff? So I feel like with plant medicine, that kind, like you said, the ego, it really kind of takes that, puts it to the side. And what I've always found interesting is everybody has different experiences, but I feel like it always gives you an assignment afterwards of some sort. Like, you can't just go back to living life the way you were before, or you will feel like you are going against yourself.
Yeah.
Like, you're hurting
yourself. It illuminates
yourself
a level
even
of
more.
truth that is so hard to deny.
Yeah. So what do you think when people, because I feel like a lot of people, they get that assignment, but they don't take it. What do you feel like happens?
Massive cycle of this.
Yeah.
I mean, interestingly, I think something that I was reflecting on a lot, and I think this kind of goes to what I was saying, and not outsourcing that inner power, that authority, is what I saw. Because whenever I did ayahuasca, it was in this retreat, and it was amongst about 20 people, and it was like a 2-week process, and you get very close to the people that you're doing it with. And, we had a group chat, we kept in touch for a while until eventually that kind of faded out. But what I noticed in observation was some people, and I've seen this kind of outside of this group as well, was they became almost addicted to the experience of the ayahuasca, but almost because it seemed like they were attributing the healing source to that medicine instead of recognizing that it was just awakening them to the healing power that already innately resides within. And I think intention is everything when you're using any tool, any medicine, right? It's the intention that you go into it with. And so I think that reiterating to yourself that the power is within. And I think the more in which we reinforce that, the more in which it becomes true. So I think that if you don't take the assignment, you can seek out. I think you find yourself in cycles. You know what I mean? I think that when you don't answer it's kind of what I was saying earlier too. The universe is going to give you invitations, and it's up to you to answer it. Now you can keep ignoring it, but it's going to keep coming through. And so I think anytime we see ourselves going through experiences that seem somewhat repetitive, maybe they're a little bit different, but a little kind of the same. At a certain point, we have to kind of stop and say, okay, what's really going on here? How am I playing a role in this? So I think when you ignore the message, it's just going to keep going in cycles. It'll present itself a little bit differently, but a flavor of the same, you know?
It's true, because I know every time I feel like, one example, one day I hope to do an ayahuasca journey. It's funny, in 2020, I was supposed to do one, and then it got canceled because of the pandemic. So they do say that ayahuasca calls you when you're ready for it. So I guess I wasn't ready for it at the time. But I know my intention, I feel like, will be much more ancestral when I finally do it, where with psilocybin, which was the experiences that I've had before, it was more so, please bring something to please highlight my blind spots. Most of the time, that's what I went into it with, highlight my blind spots. And I think the second time that I did it, I remember feeling like I have to stop working. And this was literally at the height of my media production company. Like, rationally, what do you mean stop working? What do you mean? Like, all of these different things. Like, literally, I was working in the midst of this. I was working on the biggest project I've ever worked on in my life. And rationally, it did not make sense for me to stop working. Rationally, it was like, what? But I remember even after getting that assignment, feeling like, I know why. I understand why. It's time for me to start focusing on things that are really important to me. And I just remember even talking to my husband about it at the time, like afterwards, and he's like, you know what? It makes sense even for other things he wasn't like, oh, well, what about no, he was like, you know what? It makes sense with what we've been talking about, what we've been going through. And I remember just not knowing how it was going to work out. Like, I'm literally in the middle of this, somehow was able to finish up that big project a lot sooner, like 4 months sooner than anticipated, and was able to sell my business 2 months later. And it just all,
absolutely.
It's like, once you actually, it's so scary. But I remember just being like, oh, how am I going to do this now? Like, last year, if you told me to do this, it would have been a lot easier.
Absolutely. But I was going to say, warning, disclaimer, living intuitively is scary because it requires you to put everything on the table. Things that you may have been like, I don't know if that's for me. It's like, no, living intuitively is actually putting everything on the table. Everything goes. And that can feel really scary. But I think the antidote to that is trust. It's developing a state of trust of, I don't know what this means. I don't know exactly how this is going to look, but I'm just going to trust. I'm going to keep trusting. I think the more experiences that you have of leaning into that, the more solidified your trust gets, and it makes it easier as you go through experiences like this again in the future, because I think it's always shifting and changing. Living intuitively is living in the now, meaning it's never going to be consistent for the rest of your life,
Exactly.
But yeah, I think it's so scary because all options get thrown on the table and you're like, oh, I have to consider things that I didn't ever think that maybe I would do.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
most I didn't think, especially not at that point. And I feel like, to your point earlier, when you're talking about the people who kept going back because they felt like it was the medicine that was healing them and
Mm-hmm.
not themselves,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, just like you said, when you have those experiences of actually trusting it,
Mm-hmm.
then you trust your body and yourself
Mm-hmm.
more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like that's why I've only had 3 experiences in my
Mm-hmm.
entire lifetime. I had different intentions each time. They
Mm-hmm.
were spread out. They weren't like
Mm-hmm.
one after the other. And because I did listen and I didn't feel like I have,
Mm-hmm.
maybe one day I will. I have no interest in going back to psilocybin. I
Mm-hmm.
like, not as of right now,
Mm-hmm.
but I still ayahuasca for ancestral reasons,
Mm-hmm.
but it's because I took the assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
don't take the
Mm-hmm.
assignment and they keep going back to it. And I remember in one of our conversations, you said so beautifully that plant medicine, it can be a medicine, but a poison
Mm-hmm.
as well. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you keep going back to it, it's almost like this addiction that's taking you away from yourself
Yeah,
in a way.
it's driving you further from the very intention that you probably had going into it initially. And I think that that goes for like everything. Anything can become a poison.
Mm-hmm.
It's really all about the intention in which you use it with. But maybe that is kind of the cycle. I think maybe if you do it enough times and you don't get the feeling that you were hoping for, eventually that light bulb moment happens and you're like, whoa, wait, I think I have to go within. And ideally you're using these experiences as an aid in that process, because that's kind of how I view them. It's a powerful medicine. I think it's a beautiful medicine. I think honoring it and respecting it, but I think recognizing that it's to be used in tandem with the innate healing power that your body already has. It's awakening you to that and helping you tap into that maybe a bit more when maybe perhaps before it was lying dormant. It's helping you to realize and see that you have that power. But that's the most important point. The power is within. It's not that that's giving you the healing power. It's awakening you to the fact that you already have it.
Exactly. No,
Yeah.
that's what I love about it. And I guess kind of bringing this back to women in particular, because I feel like a conversation that I've had with a lot of women more recently is this concept of, and I feel like this is more with Western society than any other society, women feeling like they have to have it all. The hot body, the successful career, the hot husband relationship, significant other, beautiful family, picture perfect, that they're working on all these cool projects at the same time. In a conversation I'm having with people in my family, friends, do you feel that women can have it all?
I think it's a matter of defining what having it all means.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And I think in this superficial way that you're describing, where you actually have it all the things. I mean, I don't want to say that that's impossible.
Sure.
I'm saying I think it's more about redefining what having it all actually means. You know what I mean? And I think the most powerful thing that we get to do as adults is we get to rewrite definitions for ourselves as we move through life. And so now at this point in my life, I feel like I have it all, but it's not society's definition of having it all. It's feeling connected in a partnership. It's feeling fulfillment in my career, right? But it's not actually like having $1 million career, having like this, it's not in these superficial ways. It's
Sure.
redefining what that means. I also think, though, that part of it, too, is recognizing that there's different seasons of life for different things in your life. And so maybe sometimes it's not a matter of having it all at the same time. I think that you can have it all, but maybe at different seasons of life as well, right? I think sometimes we resist that, and I think that there's times in our life where we may be called to push back, but the ego also may be resisting that because it wants to have it all right now. I'm thinking too, in motherhood, like maybe, and not that you have to, but if you want to be more present, that may require you scaling back in your career a bit more, whatever that looks like,
Sure.
which can feel like a sacrifice. But later in life, maybe as your kids gain more independence and autonomy, you get to lean back into that, right? So I think it's one, redefining what having it all actually means. And I think getting honest with yourself and and how you want that. I think more than anything, it's how do you want that to feel? Not what do you want that to look like? How do you want that to feel? What does having it all feel like? And then are you willing to kind of flow with the natural ways of the world, like in your life, and adapt and like lean in and lean out as is needed as you go through different cycles and seasons of life?
No, most definitely. And I feel like with motherhood, that's something, even in my own experience, that I felt like it was one of those things. I went into motherhood knowing I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And then once being there, like, oh my goodness, like this little human requires so much of you, you know, and I'm so grateful that I am able to stay home with my kid. But I did have ideas for other projects. This is a project I wanted to do even before he was born. So it's one of those things where I had a feeling at one point of, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to work on, you know, those intrusive thoughts of work on things that I want to. But it's one of those things, like, just because it's not right now, one day. Now my little guy, he's more independent, where he stays with my in-laws or, you know, other family a lot longer than he used to. And I'm seeing where okay, I have these little windows where I can work on and do my own thing. But also I like how you framed it when it comes to what does that look for you? Because I feel like a lot of people don't realize that they're doing a lot of things for other people. It could be for your family. It could be for, I mean, I'll be very transparent. I went after a master's degree that I wasn't interested in for my family because my family was like, oh, you know, it's one of those things, like, looking back, I wish I took some time, and not saying that doing a master's program is bad, but I wish I took time to think, what do I really want? What is something I'm actually interested, and then maybe pursued more education in those topics, you know? So like a psychotherapy, like some, like those are the things that I'm more interested in, but I just signed up for something right after school because of my family. And that's something, even if it's not your family, you feel, even just societal pressure, social media. I mean, I feel like that's one thing where, you know, keeping up with the Joneses or keeping up with the Kardashians these days, you know, because we have these devices on us 24/7. I literally have it under my lap. It's not just seeing your neighbor or family member and what types of projects or things that they're up to. It's now seeing everybody and their mother, and like people you don't even know. You know, I follow people I don't know, different thought leaders and stuff. And now I have access to them 24/7 on my phone. Where before maybe I just would have seen them on one TV program at like 6 o'clock, you know, with my family. So I feel like it's all of these outside pressures is actually taking people away from having their all. Because now I do feel like I have it all, but I'm not working full time. I'm not, you know, there are certain things that I'm not doing, but it's more my definition of having it all. I don't live in a multi-million-dollar mansion or all those things, but I'm not interested in that. And I feel like a lot of people go down that path of maybe making those types of investments and then later realizing, oh, I did this for everyone else except for me. And do you feel like that's something you have to work through in therapy with a lot of your...
Oh, yeah. But I think we're all working through that individually, or we all probably should be working through that individually, because I think, to what you said, with how much we're intaking on a regular basis, this isn't a one and done deal. We are constantly, I think, reevaluating what is it that I really, really want. And I think sifting through all of these collective stories that are being projected on us and trying to sit and see what is it that feels true for me, right? So of course I'm working through this with people in therapy. I'm also working through this with myself. You know, I think that the ego, the mind, is always playing those tricks on us. And I think it'll be like, oh, I want this. And then after a while, you have to sit with yourself and you have to ask, is this something that I really, really want, or do I want the validation that comes with it? You know, and I think that it's tricky. Sometimes you may think that you really want it, but it's actually something else that you're seeking, which is fine. I think we're always playing with the ego. I view the process of incorporating the ego as something more playful. It's okay to play with the ego. It's okay to have like some validation, etc. It's not inherently bad. But I think really evaluating what the driving forces are in your life and really sitting with them so it feels like the decisions that you're making feel more intentional. So I think we're all going through this, or it's beneficial to us to go through this process continuously, just constantly reevaluating, what is it that I really, really want? Is this something that I really want? Anytime we're making big decisions, you know?
Sure. No, and it's just that taking inventory, like
Yeah.
you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm glad that you brought up like that external validation that you might get from certain things, because I realized that's what kept me being a TV reporter for as long as I was a TV reporter for in that sector of the media field for 7 years, almost a decade. But I realized, and there were parts of being a TV reporter that I really loved, including the external validation, because
it's just fine to play with it. I think if we acknowledge it, we can find healthy ways to incorporate that in our lives.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything inherently wrong, but it's like you don't want that to be the driving and only force.
That's what the issue was at some point it became the driving force because I felt unfulfilled in other ways. I wanted to work on different types of projects that didn't align with the news industry at all. But I was still like, so I would have these feelings, I would have all these different experiences, and then I would go back to my TV reporter job. I'd go out on a story and people would see me with my mic flag and they'd be like, oh my goodness, it's ABC7. And oh yeah, hi. If I had a little time, I would talk to them. But it was one of those things where I was like, oh, wait, I'm literally just doing this because of the attention. Or sometimes I would get stopped on the street and it would be nice sometimes, like, oh, wow, people recognize my work. I think that was something that was really nice.
Yeah.
Or even if someone stopped me on the street, oh my goodness, I love your new hairdo. Like, it looks so nice. Oh, thanks, girl. Like for even frivolous things like that, I would get excited. It would like light me up. But I knew it wasn't aligned with what I really wanted to do. And I feel that that's a struggle a lot of people go through, women in particular, because I feel in a lot of situations women feel underappreciated for what they're doing. And it's maybe not because people are not appreciating them. It's just maybe not in the way they receive appreciation. But they keep doing things thinking that they're going to receive that appreciation and it doesn't happen. And I felt that way in previous careers. And again, this is not a knock on the people that I worked with before. It was just I was expecting them to give me something that they could have never given me because it was so specific to me. So thank you so much for joining us here. Please tell everybody, where can they find you?
So Instagram is Ritualized Therapy. New site is launching soon, www.ritualizedtherapy.com. And yeah, so excited.
So go and work with Alex. Get your therapy done. Do some somatic healing so that you can get in tune with your body. And thank you so much for doing this with me.
Yeah, this was so fun. We breezed through the time.
Yes, I know we did. I know when I got the cue, I was like, oh my goodness, I said that already. And I was like, and I know we'll have more to talk about at lunch. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.